In today's video, we're going to take a look at a lesser known feature of our Nikon Z cameras, and that is the multiple exposure feature, and it can create images like this. Hello everyone, my name is Taku Kamabi and I hope you're doing well. Let's take a closer look at this multiple exposure feature that I think can really flex our creative muscles. The multiple exposure feature has been in our Nikon Z cameras since they first came out on the Nikon Z6 and 7 bodies. If you don't use Nikon cameras though, this feature may still be in your own camera, so be sure to check your instruction manual to see what it's called. So what really is this multiple exposure feature? Well, simply put, the camera takes multiple exposures and overlays one on top of each other, all in camera using the blend mode of your choice. It results in a JPEG image that is quite unique straight out of the camera, so you don't have to do any post-processing on it. Now, if you're familiar with Adobe Photoshop or any other editing program, the concept of layers where the top layer is layered on top of the layer beneath it is very similar to this multiple exposure feature. Changing the blending mode on the layer in Photoshop is akin to changing the blending mode within the camera inside your multiple exposure feature. The resulting JPEG changes with the blending mode that you choose, and you can get really creative with this by using the picture control settings in your camera for each of the exposure, creating different effects for the exposures that you're overlaying one on top of another. So let's take a look at the menu settings in our cameras. The multiple exposure setting is in your photo shooting menu. By default, it's set to off. Choose on single photo if you only want to take one multiple exposure photo. This sets the camera back to regular single photo shooting mode immediately after you take the number of exposures you had it set to. Choose on series if you want to continue taking multiple exposures one after another. This saves you from having to go back into the menu to start this setting back up again. Number of shots. Choose a number between 2 and 10. This is the number of exposures you will take and overlay on top of each other. Overlay mode. This dictates how the camera will overlay each exposure onto the previous exposure. Add. It simply overlays one exposure onto the previous one. This might be similar to the overlay blending mode in Photoshop. Average. The pixel values for each exposure are averaged out by adding and dividing the pixel values by the number of exposures set. Light. The camera will analyze each pixel value against the previous exposure and use the brighter pixel between the two. Dark. The camera will analyze each pixel value against the previous exposure and use the darker pixel between the two. Save individual pictures raw. This will save each raw file that you take. So if you had previously set the number of shots to 10, you will get 10 raw files and the resulting JPEG file that the mode creates. Overlay shooting. This allows you to see the previously overlaid shots in your viewfinder so that you can align elements or roughly see the resulting image looks like. Select first exposure raw. This allows you to select a raw file that is already in your memory card as a starting point to your multiple exposure. You saw before how the overlay shooting mode allows you to change the way each exposure interacts with one another. This means that if you have an image that has high contrast, you can use that to highlight a specific part of the second image that you overlay on top of this. By understanding how an image interacts with the highlights and shadows of a pre-selected image, you can effectively use this select first exposure raw to your advantage. I know people who, when they go on photo walks around town, that they already have a set of images that are well suited for multiple exposures. So now they can concentrate on taking photos during their photo walks that match well with the predefined photos that they already have on their memory card. Now you can experiment with this on what kind of image you think might work best for multiple exposures, but I personally like images with high contrast and well-defined shadows and highlights. Now here's a great tip. When you're in the middle of a multiple exposure, you can press the play button to view the last image taken. Then press the I button to bring another menu where you can see the current progress of your multiple exposure, retake the last image, save the multiple exposure, or delete it altogether. This will give you a better idea of how your multiple exposure is progressing and as you take each exposure. So now that you know a little bit more about this multiple exposure feature, I hope this will spark some creative juices in you, and that maybe the next time you go out on a photo walk, you might be more in tune to the highlights and shadows of certain images that might work well for your multiple exposures. Now, what if you went outside and forgot to invoke that multiple exposure feature, and later realized that you had some great images that might work well with that functionality? Well, you're in luck, because if you watch my upcoming video, I'll tell you all about that functionality in your camera. If you found this video helpful, please let me know and comment below. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below as well. Thanks for watching my video. I hope to see you in the next one. Take care.